All of my life experiences have formed whatever I am and whoever I am. But the University of Tennessee came at a time in my life which was perhaps the most formative and taught me more things about relationships, about the discipline of academics, about politics, if you will, where I was actively involved in student government, than I can possibly describe to you. Taking all together, the University of Tennessee was perhaps the single most important forming agent in my public personality. I'm enormously pleased that the Baker Center will be here.
It's with great pride that the University of Tennessee calls itself home to the Howard H. Baker Jr. Center for Public Policy. The center not only houses the Baker Papers, but it also seeks to carry on the important work, ideas, and philosophy of public policy and leadership exemplified by the man it honors. Who knows better the rewards and responsibility of public service than Howard Baker, who has given his life as a servant of the people, from Senate Majority and Minority Leader to White House Chief of Staff and U.S. Ambassador to Japan. He's been called a conciliator and statesman who could make politics work. He's also been described as too nice of a guy to be in politics. But it's just that combination of attributes that makes Howard Baker one of this nation's most admired political leaders. His long career in government is testament to his unfailing belief in public service and the democratic system. He possesses a genuine respect for differing points of view, and he has an incomparable ability to build consensus among competing interests. He did not always achieve his preferred outcome, nor was the process an easy one, but he made the system work for its ultimate purpose, to serve fellow citizens and to arrive at workable solutions for real problems.
Number one, in my view, a dedicated public servant never bases his or her decision entirely on the perceived opinion of the electorate, partly because it's a matter of high responsibility to represent the constituency, all of it, and second, because you have abdicated your own best judgment, and if any single trait commends you to the people who put you there, it is their trust, stated or implied, in your judgment on great issues. The third element is you've got to be prepared to do dangerous things politically. You've got to be prepared to understand that your judgment will dictate that you do some things that your electorate may not immediately approve of, or maybe ever approve of. But that's your responsibility in a democratic system. Give them the best you got, your best judgment. A Republican or a Democrat owes a responsibility to speak for everyone and to speak for members of both parties and of every race, every geographical section.
Howard Baker will likely tell you that photography has always been his passion and politics his hobby. True, his father, stepmother, and 3 grandparents all held political office. But as a young boy growing up in his hometown of Huntsville, Tennessee, he had aspirations of being an engineer or a pilot. While in the Navy, he studied electrical engineering. And it was only by a twist of fate that he wound up with a law degree from the University of Tennessee.
And this was during the great influx of veterans after World War II, and the campus was crowded, and I stood in line all day long to register in the engineering college, and just as I got to the registration desk, they closed the window. Only as an indignant 20-year-old can do. I jumped in my car and started driving home, thought, I will never come back to this place again, and drove to the law school and noticed there was no line at all. And I stopped and I went in and I said, can I register here?
After graduation, Howard Baker became a junior partner in the law firm begun by his grandfather. In 1950, he served as campaign manager for his father's first bid for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. While helping his father set up his Washington office, Howard Baker met and soon afterward married Joy Dirksen, the daughter of Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois. The couple settled in Huntsville, where Howard Baker continued his law practice. They had 2 children, Derek and Sissy.
Hello, my name is Howard Baker.
In 1967, Howard Baker became the first Republican ever elected to the U.S. Senate by the people of Tennessee. As a first-term senator, he voted for the landmark legislation establishing revenue sharing and open housing. His ability to argue a point and work out solutions were quickly recognized among the senior leadership. Already, he was earning a reputation as a conciliator.
There's a centrist technique, and it's very different from philosophy. It's bound up in one single thing, I believe, and that is my conviction that in politics and government there must be a decent respect for different points of view. It doesn't make a pretty picture, but the only thing worse would be immobility, the inability to govern, to be paralyzed and not to be able to state public policy. So it's a mechanical contrivance to try to arrive at a consensus judgment on difficult issues, sometimes even not difficult issues.
Working across partisan lines, the freshman senator allied with Edward M. Kennedy in support of the Supreme Court's one-man, one-vote rule. It was his first major piece of legislation to manage, and it was his job to collect Republican votes in support of the controversial ruling. Howard Baker did just that. As a result, minorities were given unprecedented opportunities for representation. That victory marked the beginning of Baker's identity as an independent force.
Goodness knows in my time in government I was shouted at a whole lot, but I don't mind it when I consider that in the final analysis we'll arrive at a judgment. We will have tested that position in the fiery heat of debate, and we will go on from there.
As Senate Minority Leader, Howard Baker was convinced that the Panama Canal treaties, with the amendments he sponsored, were critical to the improvement of relations between the U.S. and Panama, indeed, all of Central and South America. As he put it, Panama would get what was necessary to her dignity, and we would get what was necessary to our security. But Howard Baker was quick to remember that the first concern of every senator is to get elected, and the second is to get reelected. And with 78% of Americans against the Panama Canal Treaty, Senator Baker knew it would not be an easy fight and told President Carter the Senate could not be pushed on the issue. An educated public was necessary, first and foremost.
I approached that issue on a more intellectual basis than I did almost any other issue that confronted me while I was in the Senate. I commissioned 2 groups of staff, including experts, to examine the issues involved in the Panama Canal debate and to give me their best judgment.
The road toward passage of the treaty was long and arduous, one that took him beyond the Senate floor to Panama to meet with President Trujillo. In a diplomatic but decidedly hard-line approach, Senator Baker convinced Trujillo to accept the treaty with amendments or expect defeat in the Senate. In the end, public opinion did change, and on the morning of the vote, Baker was able to sway enough undecided senators to achieve passage of the treaty.
You know, those of us who are in the opposition, who are Republicans, though, must take account of the fact that a victory for the president is not necessarily bad, that sometimes what's best for the country, always what's best for the country, must take precedence.
President Carter and his aides acknowledged that Baker's role had been a critical one and hailed him as one of the greatest bipartisan statesmen in recent decades.
I continue to have a great respect for the adversarial system that is the basis of the 2-party system in America, and I continue to think that notwithstanding that they fuss at each other and howl and carry on and say bad things on and off the floor, that it is still the best way to try to resolve the issues, if not to solve them, at least to produce a consensus view on what is possible to do and what's best for the country.
The fact is, Howard Baker has always had a knack for building coalitions. As an attorney, he was known for bringing civil suits to settlement and crafting solutions that convinced all parties that justice was being served. He also became known as Old 2 to 10 for the light sentences he negotiated for his clients. People from all over Scott County would flock to the courthouse just to observe Howard Baker's talents. The truth is, with his law practice flourishing, Baker had no intention of abandoning his profession to enter politics. It was only after the death of his father, a longtime House Republican, did he consider taking on the responsibilities of public service.
And when he died, there's something, I guess, deep in my psyche that says, why don't you take a look at this? Maybe you should think about public service after all. There was not a single person in my family who encouraged me to do that, mentioned that to me, or agreed with it when I mentioned it later.
Senator Baker once described himself as a Tennessean temporarily in Washington to speak for his neighbors. But in action, he placed what was in the nation's best interest above all else. Few senators can point to a record of accomplishment like his. Fair housing, mass transit, budget, and tax policy were all areas in which the Senate Majority Leader had a hand in crafting compromises to bring about needed reforms and improvements in public policy. An environmentalist as well, Baker spearheaded legislation creating the Big South Fork River and recreation area near Huntsville. In times of crisis, too, it was Howard Baker who helped provide the assurance and strong leadership the nation so greatly needed.
And I remember leaving that office after thinking that Nixon was the victim of Democratic dirty tricks, thinking that there's more to this than I know. And that what I'd better do is just put my head down and follow the facts wherever they take me.
In 1972, the country was in deep distress over potential criminal wrongdoing by President Nixon. Howard Baker was appointed vice chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities, also known as the Watergate Committee. He and Chairman Sam Ervin worked together to ensure that the truth was found. In Senator Baker's own words, he would let the chips fall where they may. As an anxious nation watched the televised committee hearings, it heard Howard Baker ask his now famous question.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
I had the honor of serving as Senator Baker's chief minority counsel on the Watergate Committee. I watched and learned as he put the good of the nation above politics. As persons of all political persuasions observed after Watergate, Senator Baker acted as an honorable and effective inquisitor who placed above all else his devotion to his country and his duty to learn the facts. The system survived and thrived despite the crisis. That's in large part due to the integrity and determination of Howard Baker.
It was in that spirit that we worked together. We understood that there were some things that were more important than gaining immediate partisan advantage. And there's some things that were necessary to do in order to preserve and protect your own constituency. In my case, the Republican Party.
Howard Baker's honesty and belief in openness would again benefit his country when he was asked to be the White House Chief of Staff in 1987. The Iran-Contra affair had seriously eroded the public's confidence in the Reagan White House. Upon taking his new position, Howard Baker successfully counseled President Reagan to present all the facts to the Congress and to the American people. A sense of trust was restored, and Reagan's approval ratings once again soared. After leaving the White House in 1988, Howard Baker continued to serve his country. In 2001, President George W. Bush appointed him ambassador to Japan. During confirmation of Baker's appointment, one senator noted that given the extraordinary record of public service of both Baker and his wife, former Kansas Senator Nancy Landon Casaubon, America was actually getting 2 ambassadors for the price of 1. The life of Howard Baker Jr. has been one of public service and tremendous accomplishment. It is from his experiences and from his courage and convictions that the Howard Baker Center derives its mission and receives inspiration. In public programs, educational initiatives, and research opportunities, the Center will discuss and debate important issues that affect our system of public governance. It will give scholars as well as the public access to a rich collection of primary resources pertaining to significant events of recent history. In fact, the University of Tennessee's Baker Center is where I've chosen to place my own papers from my years in public service. In these many ways, the Center will show the importance of public service to the health of our nation and to the continuous evolution of our form of government.
And the truth of the matter is, in my view, that where we are is the product of a grand compromise that was also the product of this intuition and judgment, the collective wisdom of the people. And it has very little logic. Its symmetry is awkward, but the truth of the matter is it works.
The Howard Baker Center will honor its namesake by teaching us how and why democracy works, and how it has built and nurtured the greatest republic in the history of the world.